Welcome to the third panel discussion of DB New Horizons, organized and produced by DB New Digital Business. Warmly welcome from my side that all of you are here tonight. And it's such an honor that we have so special guests from Hyperloop, also from China and also from Europe here. So please welcome on stage the guys from Hyperloop. I'm starting with Tim Hutter, co-founder and CEO from Hard Hyperloop. Welcome. Kasia Voljanti, co-founder, head of architecture and urban planning, Hyperloop Poland. Nice to meet you. Sun Ma, Deputy Director, Committee on Science Technology, Kasich. So he had a really long fly. Thanks also to my colleague Raphael. He discussed yesterday 1.5 hours with a hotel in Berlin, said he can sleep there. But it works, and I will pay the invoice for you later, my friend. Thanks for coming. Sorry. The next guy who's coming, please welcome Gabriele Semino from War Hyperloop. Thank you. And David Gorgan, co-initiator Eurotube from Switzerland. Welcome. And now, surprise, surprise. Hopefully he is here, I don't know, because we tried to call him. We had a warm-up before, and hopefully he is here. I'm not sure, maybe he comes later, but he said he will come. His name is Pierre Fitch, head of Unity Rail Safety, DG Move in the European Commission. He is here. But it doesn't matter. Nobody from government is here. So maybe somebody can play the role for the government. Yeah, we are all actors. But maybe he will come later, I don't know, but he said he will come. So hopefully. And many thanks, because I start every time with a short music session. And please warmly welcome my good friends Mozart on the violin, and the great rapper, you know him, maybe I saw him a lot of times in Berlin, and he is such a great musiker. His name is Infidelix. So nice to meet you, that you are here. So now we start with a short song. You can close your eyes. Everybody knows you, so it's safe here, so you can close your eyes and feel the spirit, the atmosphere, what these guys want to give to you. Okay?
Check, 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 check. You guys can hear me, kind of, yeah? I'll be loud for you.
I can hear you.
All right. Yo! Lift me up, take me up to the sky. I know that you know that I cannot fly. Please don't set me down peacefully, because I'm used to all you motherfuckers beating me. Every reach to breach in this main line. This is game time and I'm here to win. This is my life, my thoughts are reflected, so I'll shine. With my paper and pen, this is my grind. I'm just getting started and I will not stop till I'm dead in the dirt. Know that my life, it has value and worth, and not absurd to the fact that's a curse. People will say, well, that's just a mixed blessing. Let's switch shoes because I'm done with the stressing. Life is yet beautiful, let me tell you that. Writing is really my form of confessing. I'm just a guy that sailed out on a journey. Find out my way, now I think I got lost. Running in circles, but I'll find my way soon. I cannot deal with the time and the gods. Now I've lost focus on all that is good. Now I think that I am going astray. Please don't make way all I really need from you. Tell me that I am worth something today.
Ist das geil?
Dankeschön.
Woo! So let us start with the basics. Oh, wow. Please welcome Kierfitch, Head of Unit Rail Safety, European Commission. Thank you that you are coming. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, now we are completed. We are here since 5 hours on the panel. No, joking. Can somebody bring him a glass of water? Maybe you need it, I think so. Yeah, thanks. So, Raphael, can you bring him a glass of water? That's great. Thanksgiving. So let us start with the basics. Tim, what is for you a Hyperloop and what is your intrinsic motivation to work on that topic? Because every time when I see you, I look into your eyes and it's a soul explosion. Why?
Well, thanks for this great introduction. My name is Tim. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hard Hyperloop. And for me, Hyperloop is a sustainable high-speed transportation system that makes sure that you can truly live and work wherever you are. And what motivates me so intrinsically to work on the system is that I truly believe in the power of connecting people. And that's also why we are here. We are here together, we are connecting with each other, we are learning from each other. And by doing that, we are accelerating the developments of society as a whole. You can maybe even compare it to what the steam train was as a catalyst for the Industrial Revolution. Well, the same effect can be realized with Hyperloop by connecting people at a faster and also a more sustainable way that we can learn from each other, accelerate development of society as a whole, with the Hyperloop as a base infrastructure to realize that. And that's really what motivates me and keeps me up from working almost every day to realize this highly connected world and connecting people.
Wow. Kasia, is it right? Kasha? Yes. Kasha. Wow. Kasha, what is your intrinsic motivation to work on the Hyperloop technology?
For me, it's, I used to work in railways for a long time, and I connected with the history of railways 170 years ago. This was new, this was disruptive, nobody believed that it will actually exist. And it did, and right now we cannot imagine life without actually being on a train. And Hyperloop, for me, is actually the same, the new technology that we need to change the patterns of the transportations, which we are reaching the limits right now. This is the future. This is something new. As Tim said, this will make us closer together. We can go from Paris to Berlin in 1 hour. We can eat lunch in Paris and then come back to Berlin to our families. And I think that this is something that pushes us further to work on this technology.
Great, thank you. Okay, now it's maybe better because it was not such a great connection. Sun Ma, what is your intrinsic motivation to fly so many hours over the river to meet us and me in person?
Well, this long trip makes me feel exhausted. So if we have the Hyperloop from China to Europe, I won't suffer so much.
Wow. So then I can come also to you.
Okay. Maybe we need a 4,000 per hour, kilometer per hour system.
That's good. That's good. Thanks for being here.
Okay, you're welcome.
And you, Gabriele, why you are here today? What you are doing?
Well, I mean, maybe mostly because you invited me, obviously, but and because Munich is not that far, so I actually only had 4.5 hours today of train, which is fine. I hope it would be faster, but still 4.5 hours is fine. Maybe a little background to me. So I'm from Munich, and we have there a student group actually. So we're only student, we're not a company it's doing so we're building actually some small Hyperloop prototypes for our international competition that is organized by SpaceX every year. And so that's what we are doing. And so Hyperloop for us is really an opportunity to learn by doing and to think about alternative modes of transportation. What I like to say is that Hyperloop is not a defined concept. Nobody really completely knows how it will be in the end. But it's an opportunity to think about possibilities and alternative solutions. And we talk a lot about high speeds, obviously, because we like that, and sustainability, because obviously that's important for the future, and that's a key factors on solutions we have to look for in the future.
Thank you. David. First of all, I thought you are the third founder of Hard Hyperloop, but then you corrected me, so now I can meet you in person. First time. Nice guy. David, of course. David, why you are working on a Eurotube in Switzerland, and what is your role?
So I co-initiated it, Eurotube. It's a R&D initiative. It's non-profit. We co-initiated it with the people who are behind the Swiss Loop, which is a student team at ETH Zurich, also participating in the SpaceX competition. And what was so for me personally, I see Hyperloop, or however you want to refer to it, in the end it's high-speed transportation in a depressurized tube. It's kind of the maximum that you can achieve in ground transportation, and if you can do it in a sustainable way, it makes a lot of sense. And for me personally also, if you can do it in Europe, it makes even more sense. And so what our thoughts were when we were looking at or discussing about what we would like to do in this field after while actually the teams were working on the prototypes for the SpaceX competition, was that there's actually a lot of potential. I mean, as you can see it here, the people being here, that there's a lot of potential, and I'm sure also in the audience, that there's a lot of potential for Hyperloop technology and in general everything related to it in Europe, and that we should actually support that and work on that. And with a number of things that we're working on currently, we want to accelerate any commercial, academic, or from private companies projects that are in this space, and aiming to build a test track.
Thanks that you are here. Here, Fitch, thanks for your coming. What is your role in the EU Commission, and why you are intrinsically motivated to work and to support, hopefully, these guys?
Well, my role in the Commission, I'm head of, it's called the Rail Safety and Interoperability Unit, but actually we also look after rail research. And I hope you've all heard of Shift to Rail, which is the big research joint undertaking that we put €500 million of European money into, and the industry's putting €500 million into. So I mean, that's doing a lot of work on rail research. But of course, we see lots of great things happening in transport. We have huge needs in transport. We want to connect people. If you look at the problems in Europe and the world at the moment, we actually need to bring people a lot closer together. But we have to deal with the problems, particularly with climate change, with pollution, with safety. So we want to look at all the good ways of making transport better, bringing people close together. And of course, Hyperloop looks like one of the ones that might really do a lot to help. And of course, it might get me across Berlin from InnoTrans here quicker than the S-Bahn, which would have been great 20 minutes ago. So,
thanks that you are coming. Wow. Wow. Good opinion. Thanks. So, let us go deeper. Tim, what is the final goal for Hard Hyperloop? The final goal, and maybe or hopefully you could tell us a little bit about your technology you designed and your patents you're working on. Yeah?
Well, great question. Our final goal is really to work towards our vision of having this highly connected, highly sustainable world. a world where you can just travel around it with the same ease as you can now travel inside a big city with a metro or a tram, for example, and that really the world is beneath your feet. And towards that vision is where we're working towards. And yeah, one of our goals to realize that is with the Hyperloop. So therefore our main goal in the end is to realize Hyperloop networks. But of course, such a network will not just pop out automatically. So therefore, a goal on the more short term is to realize a facility where all of the technology will be proven, and that the technology that is proven is according to a European standard and European regulation. And that's why it's really great that Geert is here to also discuss about that. So that about our goals and what Hyperloop exactly is. I think it's good to also explain that in a more broader way. It's kind of a train traveling through a tube, and in that tube there's almost no air. And because there's almost no air, there's almost no air resistance. And therefore you can travel much faster, much more energy efficient, but also much more cost effective than the current modes of transportation.
Thank you. Kasia, what are your current goals of Hyperloop Poland, and what are the next concrete steps of your company?
So we actually are doing everything step by step. We realized that it will take a lot of years to implement the technology, which is completely new with the standards regulations in the European Union. So we took the tube out at the very beginning. Our first step is the Logistic Platform, which will use the existing corridors of infrastructure corridors, and it will move with the speed of around 300 kilometers per hour. We can already start with the distances from 5 kilometers. Then within this, we can test parts of the system. Then the next system is cargo, bigger cargo. Then we'll move also without this tube. Then we will add the tube to the whole system. We'll move with the speed around 600 kilometers per hour, which for the European conditions is actually a good speed, an average speed that we can actually approach. The first step is the passenger transport, and we are aiming 2030 to start with passenger Hyperloop transport in the vacuum tube.
Wow. Okay, thank you. David, the organization Eurotube has the aim to develop a 3 kilometers long high-speed vacuum transportation track in Europe. How far are you in the process?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, it's quite a long process to build and even to find a location for such a rather long track. And I mean, as I'm from Switzerland, we have a quite small country, so there are not many places, especially around the mountains, where you can find like a 3 kilometer long and completely straight track, or like location for a track. So what we did in the past, so we started a year ago, and what we did in the past year was to first talk to a number of people and locations all around Europe, especially in Germany, France, and in Switzerland, and actually also in Berlin. We're also in Berlin here, and we found several locations that were very interesting, and fixed it down now to 2 locations. One in France. It's close to the border, in the border region, like in Alsace, the border region to Basel, to Switzerland and Germany. And the second one is actually in Switzerland. We found a place that would work there. It's in a valley, so it's quite picturesque. And currently we're fully focused on getting everything. So we're talking to all the municipal levels and in the state levels to get the necessary permits and any other regulatory aspects that have to be achieved for that. And we were working on funding, and we have quite some substantial support already. We're working on the planning together with the Swiss Federal Railways and a number of other industry partners. And on the other side, supported by some public funds and private individuals that really see the vision and As I mentioned before, it's more of a technology that is so, if it's possible to do it, especially in a commercially viable way, it's like a moonshot mission. It's something that it's very audacious. It's very hard. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of money also, frankly. But it would be sad not to try. We have to try. And so yeah, we're quite far currently. We want to start building. We should have the permits by spring, next spring, and we hope to finish the track by the end of 2019.
Wow. Okay. Gabriele, my friend, your team around War Hyperloop is a winner of SpaceX Hyperloop Pod Competition, reaching a final speed of 467 kilometers per hour. Is that right?
That's true, yeah.
Wow. The aim of Hyperloop technology in general is to reach 1,000 kilometers per hour. Is this a realistic number, and what has to be done to reach this goal?
Well, okay, so maybe start with a little background to the competition.
We have time.
So we have time. So, I mean, I assume everybody knows, like, the Hyperloop idea was started 2013. I think at least with that name by Elon Musk. And 2015, he started a Hyperloop competition for student teams. And actually, like, team was also part of one of the first teams that actually joined the competition. And I've been part of from around 2016, 2017. And so the goal of the competition is actually to build Hyperloop prototypes, so not actually transporting people yet, at least, but just to test the technology. And in particular, in the last competition, the goal was to go fast, because we like to talk about high speed, we like to go fast, and that's some clear goal that a student team can hold on for 1 year while working day and night to get the prototype ready for the competition. And so the goal of the competition is really speed. However, the track is pretty limited. So we only have 1 or 2 kilometers test track. That's why I really like to hear that more tracks are being built, because that would be really helpful to reach that high speeds. Now, in the short track, we have actually reaching high speeds means reaching high acceleration. So the technology we use are really going towards this goal. That's mainly electric motors and so on. Obviously, for the full scale, you want to go 1,000 kilometers per hour. Obviously, you're not planning to do that on a 1 kilometer track. You could try to do that on a 1 kilometer track, but that doesn't make sense. I mean, you're not supposed to transport people if you go that fast and you use that acceleration. So the goal on the longer run is obviously to find technologies that maybe don't have that high acceleration in the short track, but can be tested on a longer track and allow to actually reach 1,000 kilometers per hour. What people in the railways industry like to say is that wheels are not that good at that speed. So the main issue is really to find a solution to go that fast. And that means switching from wheels, so some technologies that use contact between two moving parts, to contactless systems, and that's why most of the people here probably focus on maglev systems, and which kind of gives you the necessary mean to travel that fast without touching the ground, which would be bad at that speed. And so that's what's needed for 1,000 kilometers per hour. I think that's totally realistic. I think that's not the main issue. Like one of my team members, that's one of our technical leads, likes to say that from a technology standpoint, everything is possible, or at least a lot of it is possible. The issue is to do that in a way that works, that building the infrastructure for that is not excessively expensive, and that's safe and comfortable for the passengers. So that's actually the tricky part. Having something around 1,000 kilometers per hour, depending on the test track, it's definitely possible.
A good spirit. So I learned from my father, a problem is a problem when it is a problem. So go for it. Yeah. Yeah, this is Saxony English I learned in school. Yeah. Gabriele, my friend, next question. Why? Start with the why. Why you are not planning to create a company? You have the mother of BMW in Munich. You have Siemens. You have such great investors. Why you are a student project at all?
So I will actually say we have great sponsors. That's how you call them when you're a student team. And That's a fair question, and obviously, let's say our main goal right now and for the last year has been really to do the competition. That I think has an importance by itself, because that gives students the opportunity to actually work on the technology. That has two main advantages: lots of strange sounding ideas at the beginning that get to be tested and developed at least at some point and at least concept proved. Yeah. And on the other side, gives the students the opportunity to work on hardware and work on real problems during the studies and to try to find technical solutions, which is not always what you learn at university, but what you get to do with such a project. Obviously, many people, and probably Deutsche Bahn as well, would like to know whether we would like to go on a commercial, let's say, route. We actually have thought about that quite a lot, and we keep thinking about that. The thing I see is that there is quite a lot of companies moving in that direction, and what we are looking for is the way we could bring another things in. So it doesn't make sense to just have another Hyperloop companies. You need, at least in my view, you would need to have to add something to the table, to bring some new technologies maybe, or to bring some new advancement that would help everybody. Like if there are 20 companies trying to do the same thing, maybe one is successful but not, and maybe one is successful, maybe no one is successful because you divided the whole investment money, let's say, on all of them. So we are trying to think, okay, is there a way we could bring now the expertise we have due to the competitions to the table and contribute in some meaningful way that would at least distinguish us a little bit from all the other initiatives so that we can contribute a little more or not. And we have some ideas, but we haven't the one that has started as yet, but we are working on that.
We speak about later when we are alone. Yeah. Sun Ma, what is your role and mission with CASIC in China? Which countries you want to address with your technology and business? Is it only China, or because China is not so huge? Or
Well, my major is power electronics, so I just work for the traction algorithm and the motor design and the aviation design. So just a geek guy. So, and I'm very glad to come to Germany, the teacher of China for high-speed rail train and maglev train. So I want to address my technology in my homeland or the Germany. So thank you.
So with your technology, we spoke about in the pause, we spoke about your plan to build up also a test track or test line, and you said, yeah, we will do it 1,000 kilometers, we will start next year, but there was a misunderstanding, it was the speed you were working on, and I was wondering, okay,
1,000 kilometers
too. Good friend of mine, good job. But then there was a correction, how you are starting with, how long is your test track you will build up within the next months?
Well, we will build a 500 meters test track. So we just take the traction technology, the aviation, and the guiding technology. So we want to prove that we can achieve 1,000 kilometers per hour. So we built this short line to show to the public, to make things easier to step one, step two.
Here, you work in politics. What do you think, what is the general opinion, your general opinion about Hyperloop? Does it get a lot of attention in the European Commission at the moment?
Or whether it's connecting autonomous cars or drones. So it's all these new things which the focus is on. So yeah, people come to us. I think probably many of your people have been to us. Certainly Hyperloop One and so on have been to us, and they want us to help. They want money, of course. People always want money, but they also want us to help with the legal side of it, the sort of getting the safety cases right, and also making it work across Europe. Because of course, fine if we build lots of little Hyperloops connecting airports together, for example, as looks like quite a good early business case. But if you actually want to build a network, then you don't want to get to the problem that we had with the early railways, for example, where everybody builds a different track gauge, where they do all the technical things different, which is still a problem today. So the question is, if you really want to build a network, can we at some point put in place standards that would make that happen? Now, I think it's too early to do that yet, but that's certainly something we need to factor in as the thing develops.
It's good that all of you guys are here, that we can work on one standard. It's the right moment, yeah. Here, when will be the first Hyperloop live in Europe? Hopefully also in Germany. What do you think?
I think it could happen pretty quickly, because at the moment you don't have to go through all the standards hurdles that you would do if you were building a plane or a train. I mean, you've got to prove to somebody that it's safe, but you can do that in whatever way you want. So if you can get the technology working, you could have at least a trial demonstration running in a few years, I think. It doesn't take that long. Of course, planning permissions may be a different matter.
What can European Commission to speed up the implementation of Hyperloop?
Well, money. I mean, and of course, one thing we're looking at the moment is the big budget, the overall European Union budget for post-2020. And that at the moment is quite open. We've made our high-level proposals, but I think Hyperloop can probably get its foot in the door and get money out of that proposal. And then beyond that, we can obviously help you look at regulatory processes. As I say, I don't think we want to constrain you very much at the moment. We want to sort of say this is how it could be done, and we can help you think about the framework. But actually, for getting initial projects off the ground, you don't want that. You want to make something happen, show people what the real potential is, and then if it looks as though it's going to be something that gets big, after that we can rapidly come in and start looking at the standards process with you. But don't put the standards before everything, don't negotiate everything, because then nothing will happen. But remember, if it does start happening quickly, that you've then got to get the standards in place behind it very quickly.
Oh, great. So questions to all panelists here. Can we use existing infrastructure as train stations for your Hyperloop technology?
Well, I think this answer is yes and no. It depends on our goals. So the existing instructions is basically in the urban area. So the kind of the line cannot achieve higher speed. If we want to accelerate faster, so we need to build a new instructures to some far away area to make it straighter line. So that's my answer.
Tim?
Well, definitely a great question, and we did a very thorough analysis of the route between Amsterdam and Frankfurt. And based on that research, we could follow the existing infrastructure, like roads and railways, for more than 70%. So that's actually quite a big percentage in which you can just use the existing infrastructure ground to implement your network, and therefore also speed up the implementation. And where you can't use the existing infrastructure network, a good solution is to go underground, for example, in order to speed up the implementation process even more.
Of course. Sorry.
As I said before, we will actually use the existing infrastructure with our technology. And I think, as an architect, I think that it only makes sense if we put the Hyperloop to the centers of the cities. Otherwise, we have the same situations like with the airports, that we have to go from the airport to the city center, then wait there. So we cooperate with architectural offices from Chicago in America, and we have done already the projects in Chicago, how we actually can put the Hyperloop lines to the existing stations, as well as we're doing the feasibility studies for the central communication hub, which will be built in Poland in 2030. The government agreed to that and we've wrote an appendix for this, that the Hyperloop is one of the modes of transportations which will also be developed at this transportation hub in Poland in 2030. So I think that we have to look at this whole infrastructure and new projects a little bit different, from a different perspective, and we need to use as many existing infrastructure, also the stations which are already existing, as well as the regulations from the railways or from airplanes, that we can implement this much faster and not spend a lot of money of building completely new routes, completely new stations for that.
So it's a combination between that.
Another thing on this, and I mean, I very much agree with that, but one of the great selling points of Hyperloop is that it's supposed to be low carbon. Now, of course, it's low carbon in operation, but if we end up building vast amounts of new infrastructure, we may take away some of that advantage, particularly if we tunnel, even with relatively small tubes. So I think it's vital that we actually make sure we reuse infrastructure, and also that we get it into the city centre, because the last thing, again, we want from an environmental point of view is to create new sprawling cities. We want to encourage cities to go back to being dense, and that means getting people in and out of the centre of cities effectively. So let's reuse the centre of the city with Hyperloop as well.
Isn't it too expensive to build up an infrastructure for Hyperloops? Where does the money should come from? What do you think? What is your wish?
So if I may add something to that, yeah, I mean, I can't answer the question definitely, but what I think related to this, what important questions are that have to be answered is that, I mean, first, currently, the capital expenditure required to build these tracks, especially if you can't use existing technology, so it differs, of course, but if you have to build it completely new, it's quite expensive. From our calculations, it should be around 20 million euros for tracks that are per kilometer, for tracks that are on pylons, and then double the amount if it's on the ground, and of course also taking like much more time. And the issue is, the first issue is high capital expenditure. How do you solve that? The second issue is we don't even know we don't even know how much the operation costs. We don't have the details of the operation like down yet. So you can't really work on full scale implementations where when the operational and even some of the like standards aspects that we talked about before are not in place yet. And that's why most of the companies, I mean, most of the people here and also in the whole world are working on feasibility studies, are working on test tracks and to test prototypes and to find, on the one side, there are companies that are working on the whole system, finding the best way how to do the whole mix together. What is the best way to do it there? Lowering costs, lowering and making it safer, and all of these aspects. And on the other side, there are companies such as we are more focused on all the subsystems. So, in our opinion, before we can even think about the whole system, we have to first look at, on the one side, existing technology and existing products. For example, vacuum pumps that can be, that there are already companies that are working on vacuum pumps, and they're in Europe, and how to use them and change them to be applicable to Hyperloop tracks. And then when you figured out these details, and we are doing this in a test track which is not full scale. It's a 2-meter diameter track, and we were planning to do that. And when you fixed these aspects, when you improved all of the capital expenditure required to build such a track, then you can focus on the whole system. And I mean, this will take time, so you can't really. It's hard to say, yeah, how much exactly this will cost, but from where exactly it's coming from, I can say it from our side. We have quite a diverse support, so it's coming from industry because they see that they have products that can be applied. So it's kind of an outsourced R&D. Then there's public support, especially regional funds that are. I mean, it's a nice highlight when you can offer when your area has such an implementation of such a test track. So that's one way to get the funds. And the third thing is that there are in the commercial projects that there are actually people who aim to earn money with this and to make investments that have a return. And so, but that's more long term. That's quite long term, in my opinion. So, yeah.
When I spoke with my colleagues about the Hyperloop, with my colleagues from Deutsche Bahn, they said, most of them said to me, we have a great infrastructure already in Germany, why we should do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. That's
good.
The thing is, what I think regarding this question, I could very well imagine that the first worldwide tracks, like the actually full-scale tracks, either sending passengers or even just freight, that they're not going to be in Europe, that they're going to be in places where the infrastructure is not as developed yet, and where it's way more useful to, similar to how the broadband infrastructure was skipped and directly going to mobile telecommunication in other countries in the world. You could do the same thing for ground transportation, and so even if this is the case. In Europe, we can still work on the technology. So if we make sure that we are involved and that we have the know-how necessary to build such tracks, to build the products necessary for these implementations, then even though the first tracks might be built somewhere else in the world, once they're proven, it will be very easy to create them here in Europe, and then we can create it from our own work. We don't have to rely on other support. Yeah.
Thank you. What is your wish to the EU government, to the EU Commission right now? Because he is here, Tim, we spoke about you want to meet him in person. Now he is here, he is not an avatar, he is real.
Yeah. So, all right, now there's my chance.
For flying in. Technologies, thanks to my technique.
Before I will directly ask the question, I would like to sketch a more broad situation. And that is that we have a huge challenge lying in front of us as society as a whole. And that is that the whole CO2 budget that is stated in the Paris Climate Agreement will be completely absorbed just by the aviation sector itself already this century. And that is even if we invest 200 billion a year in high-speed rail. And that's that high-speed rail. It is a great solution, but as a competitive mode of transportation, it cannot compete that much on speed as Hyperloop can with aviation. So therefore, what we would love to see from the European Commission is the support for this European Hyperloop network where you can travel from every main capital to another main capital in another country. But also, a very nice point that has not been touched upon yet is that the cities that are connected on this route will be connected with certain on and off ramps, just like as a highway, how you can take the exit. So that means you can have direct connections in this network without having to stop in between. And therefore you can increase the connectivity and the speed of the connections by an order of magnitude. And a step to realize that is with the first corridor, but all in line with this bigger and broader vision of a broad European Hyperloop network. And that's something I would definitely like to continue the discussion upon, how to realize that big dream with small steps.
Now I have to say something. No, okay, that's fine. No. Well, I mean, I actually just wanted to ask something about the whole discussion we had. Well, in principle, you asked how to get the money because it's expensive. Well, that's for sure, it's expensive, right? I mean, we're talking about new infrastructure, and new infrastructure is, by definition, expensive. I mean, you have to build something, a track, over several kilometers, several hundred kilometers probably, because that makes more sense. He mentioned some numbers. Obviously, if you multiply that by the distance between, I like to use Munich and Berlin, because it took me 4.5 hours today, but just in general, that's quite a lot of money. And it's for sure no single company by itself will probably be able to pay for that. That's probably something that at some point, as a society, obviously, as I said, we have some goals, and at some point we would have to decide that's something that makes sense to be done, so we have to do it, and obviously society kind of have to pay for it. Obviously what we can do for the moment, and I'm pretty sure many of us are quite clear that this is the goal for the moment, is to work on the technology in order to be ready when we need it. But obviously our technology we need to focus on is, I mentioned that before, from a technology standpoint, you can do almost everything. Like we have technologies and we can find technology and evolve, so the technology can evolve in many directions and many things are possible. The issue I see is in order to have this application, in order to have tracks in Europe in particular, at some point, is to have it at a low cost. And so I actually see I think the focus should be a lot on low cost. Because if we plan at some point to do these new routes, and we see that, okay, they are factor 4 faster, but they cost an order of magnitude more, who will, I mean, I'm not sure from a politics standpoint, but probably it's going to be quite hard to discuss, okay, yeah, you're going to spend 10 times more, but you're going to it's going to take only 1 hour instead of 4 hours. And maybe it's going to be a little bit greener, maybe we transport more people, but still, that bill you're going to pay is pretty high. So the lower we get the bill, the higher the chance we have to actually build tracks in Europe one day.
Thank you. Sunma. Wait one moment.
Well, as an outsider of another continent, so
Sunma, the question is how the Chinese government is supporting you guys right now.
Well, the government is not supporting us right now. So we use our own money to start a test track. So the national level hasn't started. Yeah.
What is your wish to the government?
Well, I think we should discuss a lot and to form an international standard to make sure our train start from Beijing can drive through the same tunnel to the Berlin. So we don't have to build 2 different systems. So that's my wish.
Kasia, do you want to say something? Maybe. Some questions also to the EU Commission.
I think that European Union, the Commission, should also support this new technology with research and development, because everybody is talking about financing, and I personally think that that's not the goal of European Commission, just to build the routes between the cities and to connect the cities. That should be the goal of railway companies, to see the possibilities actually to invest in new ways of mobility. As, for example, car companies are investing their money in the new ways of mobility. So that's maybe my question, if there is a way, or where you think about it, how you can support Hyperloop development in research and development.
Okay, thank you. In case, Tim, what is your advice, or the others also, what is your advice, what should Deutsche Bahn do in case of Hyperloop? Because I'm the moderator today.
Yeah, definitely work on it.
Running.
That's the short answer. No, the more elaborate answer is that if you look to the opportunity that's up there of having this Hyperloop network constructed and therefore operating this network, there is a market lying there of trillions of dollars. And if you are the operator that will operate, for example, this network in Europe, then now is the chance to create your first mover advantage of being involved in this Hyperloop market, being involved in the scene, get to know all the players, pinpoint your exact business position, and start to secure that. So that's my advice for now.
Thank you. David, what is your advice to Deutsche Bahn employees, what they should do now with sport shoes?
We have mics moving.
Oh, we can borrow. Thank
Thank you. Yeah, I think where there might be, I mean, I hate this word, but where there might be synergies is in areas. I mean, there's obviously Deutsche Bahn has a lot of expertise in delivering goods. I mean, in connecting goods and people, and there are. I mean, in the end, that's the same goal of what we're working on. But the question is, where do you start? And I think there, especially in this regards to this question, I think it's quite useful to look at the transport. I mean, on the one side, to interesting use cases of the transport of goods, that where it's actually required to have the speed, this amount of speed, and where it's useful to have a track like this. Maybe not maybe not 1,000 kilometers per hour, but just tracks that are quite cheap, like good, easy to build, and fast and safe. So that's somewhere where Deutsche Bahn has a lot of expertise, and where it would make sense to look into it, and then also to look at how could you enter and how could you start it in the transport of people. And there's a lot of know-how at Deutsche Bahn, and always when there's know-how, you can find ways to support each other. So that's what I would say.
That's why we are doing workshops right now with Sarah Lee from DB Ventures, and I and other guys and the team to bring you to the right guys, to bring you together with the right guys at Deutsche Bahn, to create opportunities and to find opportunities for Deutsche Bahn in case of Hyperloop. We started yesterday, and we will follow up for sure. Yeah, we will follow up. Question to all of you guys and ladies. Where do you see the development of Hyperloop in 10 years?
In terms of timeline, and from a technology point of view, it can go really, really fast. If you look at those student competitions, they design, build, and test a prototype in just 1 year. So that's an insanely speed. And if you would extract that and take into account all the like societal effects, environmental effects for implementing route, that's a bit harder to estimate how long that will take. But we envision that around in 10 years, the first pilot routes of around, let's say, 50 kilometers are already constructed and being up and running. And the plans of extending those pilot routes towards a broader network are being made then.
We have to deliver this first route because the Polish government actually forced us to the communication hub. So in 10 years we have to be almost ready with that. The first route is around 100 to 100 kilometers or even less from Warsaw to the communication hub, and then further to the west. So I think that many people or other companies from other continents are actually saying that they will open their first lines in 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. They said it 2 years ago. They are saying the same right now. Probably they would say also 5 years in 5 years from now. I think that we're a little more realistic here, and we think that it will not happen before these 10 years. And that's a challenge, actually, to find also investing and financing for the project which are not giving the revenue too fast.
I mean, I think if that's the case, we've got to be very careful with how it's pitched to everybody, because if you listen to most people, certainly most of the people who are coming to us, they are pitching this as something which is really going to be a transformative change pretty quickly. And what I would hope actually is that in 10 years, I mean, yeah, some of what is being said is hype, clearly, but I would hope that in 10 years we have something which is up and running, which actually shows whether this is a technology which is really worthwhile or not. Because we can see the potential. The question is always, is it sufficiently better And can it overcome some of the unknowns, the safety issues and so on at the moment sufficiently well that it really has a place in the transport network of the future? And I hope in 10 years we've got something sufficiently big up and running to actually show that, because we need to clearly make investment decisions in terms of, do we carry on building roads and high-speed railways, or do we do something else? And if we don't have that pretty quickly, then we just, well, actually the worst scenario is we stop doing anything. And we don't invest in the new thing, but we don't invest in the old, and we have nothing. So we need to move quickly enough that we can see that change and decide what to do.
Thank you. How long do we have to wait till we are able to transport people and goods with Hyperloops? What is your opinion? What do you think when you ask yourself?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a similar question to what we just discussing. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's pretty clear, I think to everybody working in Hyperloop, that the earlier you have a test track that shows the clear advantages, be it speed, cheap, I don't know, but in particular speed would be nice. And the moment the first person can travel 1,000 kilometers per hour through a tube, and it's clear that's a good technology, that would obviously move everything in that direction and have even more people trying to look at that instead of railways, which, coming back to Deutsche Bahn, that's why Deutsche Bahn should look at it. And so I think it's pretty clear that we have to work on that. And actually, I mean, we see at the moment test tracks being built, and that's the clear first step. I mean, the first track shouldn't be something that you throw passengers on it. Our prototypes don't transport passengers for this very same way, for the very same reason. So I'm pretty sure like 10 years is a good time frame. People like 10 years, and hopefully we won't have to adapt that a lot in the next 10 years. But I mean, 10 years is quite realistic given that test tracks are being built. I mean, we were talking about slightly over a year before the test track is ready. I'm not sure how you guys are doing, but I mean, we are seeing test tracks being built pretty quickly. One company actually, because we like to talk about Europe obviously, but there are quite strong companies in the US as well, and one of them has already built a test track, and they are actually already planning the first route somewhere in the world. We don't know that yet, for sure at least. And so I'm pretty sure that in 10 years we should definitely see something like that, because that would be very critical if we don't. So hopefully in 10 years somebody will travel, at least at latest in 10 years someone will travel with that.
So I can use it with my happy family.
It depends on where you want to go, probably, but yeah. I don't think that, like as you mentioned, there's not going to be a network that it's not going to, in 10 years, it's not going to be like the airplane that I look on the internet, how can I go to Berlin, and there is always a connection. That's going to take more time, obviously, because I mean, building infrastructure is also not the fastest thing, and we know that in Germany, obviously, as well. Like the connection Munich-Berlin has taken some time, but that's pretty normal. I mean, it's as I mentioned, it's expensive and it's a big project. So it's not like putting cars on the road. It's like you're not building one vehicle. You're building a whole infrastructure, the tube stations and so on, and then also the pods, whatever you call them, the train, whatever. So,
thank you. So, you know, for me, I'm happy because 3 times per day a train is going from Berlin to Munich in 4 hours. Or
that's true.
I'm really happy. So yeah, I can work in a train and meet new people. But I'm introverted, so the people come to me and speak to me, and then thanks that we can have a conversation. Yeah. Okay. So Tim, we spoke yesterday also, and the last weeks we spoke quite oftenly.
Almost every day, Martin.
Almost every day, and now we will live together. Great. Thank you. Also, private steps forward. No, joking. Tim, you spoke to me and you said, Martin, you're a great guy. No, joking. Martin, we want to transport with our Hyperloop technology not only Martin Fröhlich's, we want to transport also goods. Is it right that you are working on both parts on your technology?
Definitely. No, the cargo market is a huge opportunity as well for the Hyperloop, and especially for the first pilot routes when they will be up and running, maybe performing some tests. Cargo is a great solution to start with, but the system is then already capable of also transporting passengers in order to be fully prepared to transfer passengers and be part of this broader network later.
Great. So before we will open the audience and that you can ask questions to these guys, what is the biggest challenge you have right now on the topic of Hyperloop? Sunma, what is your challenge in business?
Well, we all don't know what will happen when the train runs at that speed. Okay.
Yeah. Everybody understood?
Mm-hmm. So maybe you asked a question about how long will we sit in the train. So we said 10 years. But I think after we built a full-scale test track, so we can give it a certain time. The train or the pod is not like a train or an airplane. It's like outer spaceship in the vacuum tube. So lots of questions have to solve at the moment. So we won't see the four problem before we build the full-scale track, the test track. So. Mm-hmm.
Semino?
Well, I mean, I'll answer in two questions, in two parts. Obviously, well, as a student group, obviously our main challenge is working on the technology and trying to advance that. And obviously, we are also, I mean, one of the goals of the project is obviously education. So we obviously try to find new students and educate them and give them the opportunity to learn new things. So that's one of the challenges we have, like to keep that up and bring new students in and bring new people to the mobility community and to the Hyperloop community in general. I think, and that comes back to what I was saying before, I think the general challenge in the long run is really reducing price. And I'm totally convinced that the cheaper you get to build a tube, and that's why I like, for instance, Eurotube, because they're really working on the tube, which is something that possibly due to Hyperloop competition that's focused on pods is not being done that much, because tube is obviously a big component. But in general, the whole thing I see, the main challenge is to optimize the whole system in a way that you get the price as low as possible. And there are many open questions on how to use the technology, not only on how low you can get the price for a given technology, but also what technology and what combination of technology is the best one to reduce the price even more. And so I like to stress price all the time, but I think that's one of the crucial things. If you want to convince people to build completely new infrastructure, and the only advantage cannot be high speed, because that's why we don't have Formula 1 cars on the road. You know why? Because they're way too uncomfortable and expensive. We have normal cars. So you want to bring the price down in order to make that possible.
Thank you.
I mean, I think what we need to understand is what the real business case or the use case is. And it does come back partly to what you're saying about price, but you've got to be careful on price as well. Because if we're talking about this as something to compete with, to replace aviation to some extent because of climate change, then we can't have it too slow. I mean, we have an issue in Europe that, actually in Germany, DB say that for many purposes 250 km is enough and going faster is too expensive. That's not what most of the rest of Europe is saying, in fact. But if you're only going to do 250 km, then you're not going to do Brussels to Berlin by train, for example. I mean, in fact, there is high-speed line most of the way, but it still takes 6 hours. So if we want Hyperloop to replace aviation, then you have to address this issue of actually, can we make it go sufficiently fast and sufficiently far that it can do that? And that's going to be harder, but if you just push down too much on cost, will replace rail, and then whether it's really worth doing that becomes more questionable, I think. I just wanted to come back on the challenges you were giving me on research, because, I mean, when I said money, actually at the moment we're thinking mostly of money for research. I mean, that is where we have at the moment the Shift to Rail programme, which is €1 billion up until 2020, so we're looking at what we do next. And I mean, that's where Europe can add a lot of value if we bring all the different people working on Shift to Rail together, make sure we don't unnecessarily duplicate, but we test out the different things. Maybe we can give help building test tracks, and we can coordinate things. I mean, there's some bureaucracy involved. It's not completely without risks, but I think that's where we can add a lot of value in the short term. The other thing we need to address is planning issues. I mean, certainly if we're building tubes on pylons over the ground, I think in lots of parts of Europe that's not going to be very popular. But if it then comes to tunnelling, even if it's small tubes, that's very expensive. So we've got to see how we address that issue of making it socially acceptable.
I agree totally that, I mean, what the summary of what was just said would be that probably the first main challenge is to actually deliver on the proposed benefit. So on kind of this Kitty Hawk moment where you make it possible for the first time to send an actual human at speeds of 800, 900, 1,000 kilometers per hour without killing them. I think that's quite a big issue first. And no matter how expensive it is, because usually the usual way is that in the beginning it's very expensive to do anything, and and then when you prove it goes down rapidly. And so I really agree that the first thing is to make it possible to send. Also, make sure that all the initiatives that we have and all of the projects that we're working on are sufficiently aligned to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal and towards sending humans through such a track. But obviously, I think here we're living in a capitalist society, and I think it's useful to have this competition as well. So it's competition at the same time supporting each other, and collaboration also with the industry, also with Deutsche Bahn, for example, and any other public institutions. And so I think that's the first thing, and then it's cost. Then to actually to scale it, then it will be cost.
Kasia.
I think that we should also think in a long-term perspective. So how this technology will affect the society, not only from the perspective of the passengers or goods which are transported or the operators, but also we are promising a lot, but nobody can actually measure right now what will be the exact CO2 emissions or what will be the noise pollution of this new mode of transportation. And I think that also here we should think more about researching these issues and then make conclusions about this new mode of transportation. And at the same time, we can also do the technology better when we know that, for example, the noise pollution is too big, so we are still at the stage to improve it.
Thank you. So I'm quite happy that when we had the warm-up before we started here at our panel discussion, I'm quite happy to see that all of you guys are such open-minded to speak each other and not to play ego shooter. Most important thing also. And I would like to set up one standard that we can follow up after that panel discussions, that we meet each other several times and then to work on one standard for the European network. We could build up like a Hyperloop connectivity in every European big country. This is my personal dream or target after I will marry. So, guys, it's not finished, but now I want to open a short discussion round with you, the audience. So some questions you have to the Hyperloop guys and ladies.
Thank you very much for this talk. I'm not very into Hyperloop technology. I'm not following the news like every day into that. But I would like to hear your opinion and your vision about it. Where do you think in the world will it be first implied? Yeah, it's dividing this question into 3 scales: in the world, in the European community, and in Germany accordingly.
Well, in the world, to start with it, we envision that the first actual Hyperloop that will be up and running will be built in a region or in a country where the decision-making process is much more convenient than it is in Europe. So think about, for example, China or also the Middle East, for example. So that we envision like as the first actual place in the world. And in Europe, there were some great possibilities of first pilots already mentioned by Kier, to connect, for example, airports towards city centers that require a high dense connection. So those kinds of pilots in Europe would be suitable to start with. And in Germany, I actually I think it's best to let those answer that question.
I mean, I like to think between Munich and Berlin, but just because I get to use the track quite a lot. That's the reason. That's the reason. I mean, that's the thing, yeah, as he mentioned, is that first we'll probably start with shorter tracks. You shouldn't be too short, because if it's too short, then the high speed doesn't make sense. I mean, if it's too short, then it doesn't make sense to go 1,000 kilometers per hour, because you have to just accelerate and then brake all the time. So you probably want to go a little longer. I think Munich to Berlin to start with could be slightly too long, so we're gonna have to wait some time. But on the longer run, obviously, that's actually, I think, like Munich and Berlin is actually a pretty good distance on the longer run, because you actually get a quite big improvement in time. You need to connect the 2 cities, and you can travel at high speeds for a long distance. But obviously, particularly, I would argue due to costs, you won't start with 600 kilometers. You first want to prove the technology on a shorter track, and obviously connecting airports to city or maybe logistics hubs would probably be the business case.
So in the end, I can go from Berlin to Munich in 50 minutes.
Actually, I mean, if you calculate that with 1,200 kilometers per hour, you could actually go slightly above half an hour. So that would be even faster. Obviously, that's gonna take some time to make accurate analysis, and as we mentioned, the technology is not there yet to have the full system in place.
But then I can't work anymore in the train, so it needs longer to work.
You get issues as you have today with the plane. Yeah, that's why I like the train more than the plane. But in the end, I think you'll appreciate the fact of being there in half an hour more than the fact that you didn't get your laptop out in time. So.
will work more efficient.
Yeah, you're already there, or you will start later, so you can work at home. I think it's better. I would argue it's better.
Any more questions? 2 or 3 questions more, and then we
go
to the network session in the other room.
I would just continue. We heard a lot about costs and pricing, and I wonder, besides cargo transportation, who do you think will be the customers of Hyperloop? Will it be some kind of mass transportation or just an elite using it?
So at our first stage, we are aiming at the logistic companies. So we would compete with the heavy-duty trucks, which are at the moment moving with an average speed of 55 kilometers per hour in European Union. They are emitting a lot of CO2s. They are really slow, and they are just doing the whole traffic that they're responsible for a lot of traffic in European Union. So we think about the short distances between the logistic hubs on distribution centers. So we could take the heavy-duty trucks out of the roads, and instead of that, use this technology, and at the same time to test the parts of the system that further it could be used for passenger transport.
More or less. Because regarding the passenger transport, who would be the passengers? Will it be some kind of replacement for planes, or will it be indeed some high cost tickets?
I will answer first. Sorry. If I already have. I think that it will for sure work like high-speed rail, for example, in Spain, which it took a lot of air traffic to the railways. But we should think about Hyperloop more like a whole system. This is not a competition for airlines or railways. It's a complementary system which will make our society better, which will make the transportation easier for us, which will be the next stage. So I don't presume that we'll actually be instead of railways or be instead of flights. We will take some of the traffic from these modes of transportation, but this is, we're actually analyzing a lot of almost 400 routes in European Union and other European countries, and the conclusion of that is that it doesn't make sense on every route, and in Western Europe it's doesn't make so much sense, like for example in Central or Eastern Europe where there is no high-speed rail at that time, and this would really bring us further and connect Western and Eastern Europe. For example, right now we cannot go by train from Warsaw to Tallinn. We cannot go because there is no railway route. So we have to fly or we have to go by car, which takes like 15 hours. With Hyperloop it would take 2 hours. And that's a big difference. If we take the route that we are all the time saying here from Munich to Berlin, we already saw what was actually happening with Transrapid in Germany. It didn't happen. I think that 4.5 hours with high-speed rail right now, it's a really good deal. And it will not make sense in every country to build it, for sure. And right now, the others.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the interesting discussion so far. I have a question to Sun Ma, if I understand the name correctly.
Very correct.
What potential do you see for the Hyperloop under the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative? What potential do you see for the Hyperloop under the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative?
Oh, well, the 1,000 kilometers per hour system is not enough for the one road, one belt. Yeah, but we look forward. We think further about 2,000 and 4,000 system. So it will be a better system. And so I just asked. So can we have international standard for the Hyperloop system, so we can build a unique way from China to the Europe? Well, this one road, one belt strategy is too large for me. So I think the higher speed is better. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to add a short thing to that. Yeah. I think actually the sweet spot of Hyperloop is city pairs that are, I mean, this was also discussed, it's nothing new. The city pairs that are at distances of around or a bit more or much more than 1,000 kilometers. Because that's where you have the benefit in time with the acceleration because of the enough distance where you can accelerate and you can gain the additional speed. And the longer you go, the more the infrastructure cost always increases. It's not like where you have the increasing economies of scale with doing it in the higher distances. So if you would do a track that goes like from China to Europe, it would be very expensive. And there it might actually make more sense to use airplanes because they don't need any additional infrastructure, and because, I mean, airplanes can also still be improved. So it's not like they're just sitting at this technology and they're not going to develop. So it's actually like there's a sweet spot for Hyperloop.
I'm really happy that just a few minutes ago you mentioned for the first time tonight Transrapid, which was obviously a project that for me is still like this distant childhood dream, where in the 80s and 90s we thought we would finally have that, a train that goes really fast, uses 70% of existing infrastructure, you start by connecting airports and then you go further. So pretty much everything you've said we already had back then, just that the speed limit was set at, let's say, 400 or 450 kilometers an hour. What can you learn from that massive failure? Because obviously it was the largest economy in Europe that poured billions after billions into trying to make this thing happen, and in the end there's exactly one in Shanghai that also has never been extended beyond the initial 35 kilometers.
I mean, I think what you saw with Transrapid is that although it was a very good technology, it wasn't sufficiently better to make up both for its very high infrastructure costs and actually to sort of justify completely rebuilding a network. If Hyperloop is to have a place, then it's got to overcome those two things. And I mean, I know some of the Hyperloop projects at least try and address those infrastructure costs by using passive maglev, for example, to save some of the costs. But I think that is the question that's out there. They've got to demonstrate, and demonstrate pretty quickly, that it can deliver something which is so much better in CO2 terms, so much more flexible and cheap enough to build that it actually will have a place. Because do remember that alongside everything we're talking about here, not only aviation will be getting better, but on the roads, clearly we have connected and automated mobility coming down the track. And hopefully my railways are also going to start doing things a lot better, because quite a lot of the technologies we're talking about for Hyperloop could be applied on rail if we invest more money there. So yeah, it's got to actually make sure it's a lot better than what we could do otherwise if it's going to happen. And I think that is a question that isn't yet answered.
So thanks, guys. So the discussion didn't end here. We will follow up laterly. So thank you guys that you were here. We will have a jam session in the other room later with my friends. And before I will close this panel discussion, I will let you know that we have our DB Intrapreneur program started last week. Yeah, Thanksgiving. And if somebody wants to join us, or if somebody has ideas to be an entrepreneur with a great idea, then come to these guys. Wow. And speak with him. His name is Christian. And if you have questions to these guys, then come. They are also open-minded enough to answer, and hopefully you will stay here until the end. So it will close at 10. I will be the last one here, hopefully. So thanks for coming, you guys. I learned a lot, and I'm really happy that we had this great podium discussion with you guys, that you came to Germany, and I'm really happy. And for the future, I will watch this video again and again and again. I will become older and nicer. Yeah, nice feelings.
Yo, read the future right on this beat. Infidelics rep for these streets. Trust what I say, we got the same goals. We're both getting old and we're trying to eat. I can barely sleep when I think about all the shit I've done. Rocking the microphone, travel.
We want to make sure that we use all the technologies in Europe that we have that will make transport better, connect people better, help us decarbonise, and of course make Europe competitive in the world.
I'm sure that we definitely see some tracks, and our goal now, and we really need to work on making sure that we'll have more routes and that we'll create a whole network in the whole world.
I do believe in Hyperloop technology. These things will change our life. So the virtual life is connected by the internet, but the physical life is connected by the Hyperloop.
I'm a great believer in Hyperloop technology, and that's because if we look to the challenges that we currently have, is that the aviation sector will absorb the complete CO2 budget already this century, and that is even if we invest 200 billion in high-speed rail. So we really need to find an alternative for this aviation sector. And high-speed rail is, for example, a very nice technology for the moment, but it cannot compete with the aviation sector in terms of speed. And that's really where the sweet spot of Hyperloop is, and where the Hyperloop comes in to provide this alternative.
I believe in Hyperloop technology. I believe it can connect people in a very short time. It can also change the sustainability in Europe.
Obviously, if we can go from one city to the next at a very high speeds, we can also envision living in Munich and going to Berlin to work, and that's obviously going to change everything.
I think the potential of the technology is clearly there. What we have to see, what we've discussed tonight, is actually to see it delivered and to see if, in the end, the cost benefit of it makes it better than what's on the table already, what we could do with rail, what we could do with electric cars, what we could do with improving aviation. If it can make a compelling case and if it can deal with planning issues, then yeah, I think there is a very clear possibility for it in the transport mix.
I hope that the cargo will be already available in around 5 years, with the passengers will probably need to wait another 5 years.
I believe a lot in the Hyperloop technology for use cases that are between cities of about a distance of 1,000 kilometers.
And to find a spot in this Hyperloop market, I would love to work together with Deutsche Bahn in looking into business cases and what is the exact business potential, and work together on that to make it clear, to provide Deutsche Bahn this opportunity to become, for example, the next Hyperloop operator.
It was a great honor that all these Hyperloop players came to Deutsche Bahn this evening. And we had somebody from the EU Commission, we had somebody from the Hyperloop initiatives in China, Kasik, we had also the Hyperloop initiatives in whole of Europe. So it was great to see that all of them want to speak together and find a standard on it.
And I've been running uphill for way too long right now. And I've been running uphill for way too long right now. I try my hardest to run away, but it finds me somehow. I try my hardest to hide the pain, but it finds me somehow. These demons keep knocking on my window.